Hello everybody. Now today we are understanding the topic fertilization in flowering plants, and we observe that the flowering plants, that is angiosperms, they reproduces sexually by double fertilization, where first we have to understand the meaning of the term fertilization. What is mean by fertilization? The fusion of male and female gametes to form a diploid zygote is called fertilization. And the process of fertilization in angiosperms is described as double fertilization. It is said to be double fertilization because the act of fertilization completed two times. One, syngamy, that is first fertilization, and two, triple fusion, that is second fertilization. Thus, the entire mechanism of fertilization involves two major steps. One is syngamy, other is triple fusion. Thus, the act of fertilization completed two times. Therefore, it is described as double fertilization. Now, we have to understand the detailed mechanism of this double fertilization. In the process of double fertilization completed by four sequential steps, and these are the four sequential steps, where number one is known as porogamy, second siphonogamy, third syngamy, and the last one it is known as triple fusion. Actually, the process of fertilization starts from the first step, that one is known as porogamy, because in the gynoecium or carpel there are three main parts. One part is known as stigma, another part is known as style. For example, here this one part it is known as stigma, this part is known as style, and at the base it consists of ovary. Thus, stigma, style, ovary, they are the three parts occur within the carpel, where first of all the stigma receives pollen grains, and when pollen grains are received by the stigma, then from this pollen grain during germination they produces a pollen tube, and this pollen tube enter through the stylar cavity up to the ovary cavity. Thus, from the pollen grain the pollen tube is formed, and this pollen tube now enter in the stylar cavity. This pollen tube enter in ovule body by three different methods, so that the entry of pollen tube in ovule body is described by three different terms, and these terms are like, first one term here, the first type of entry of pollen tube in the ovule body, it is known as porogamy. The first one entry of pollen tube in the ovule body through micropyle, this is described as porogamy. Observe here, this is a black color pollen tube, this one is known as ovule, and the ovule has a small opening, this one opening is known as a micropyle. And when the pollen tube enter in the ovule body through micropyle, this one entry is described as porogamy. Another type of entry of pollen tube, that in some ovules the pollen tube enter through the second part. This is the second type of entry of pollen tube in the ovule body. That in some plants, the pollen tube enter through the integuments. These are the integuments, protective covering of ovule body, and through this integument, the pollen tube enter into the ovule body. This entry of pollen tube, it is known as mesogamy. Entry of pollen tube in ovule body through integuments, it is known as mesogamy. Then third one possibility of the entry of pollen tube in the ovule body, and this one possibility, it is known as chalazogamy. What's happened? In some ovule, the pollen tube enter directly by rupturing the chalazal end, and by breaking the wall of chalaza, the pollen tube enter in the ovule body. This entry of pollen tube, it is described as chalazogamy. Thus, pollen tube enter in the ovule body by three main methods. One is porogamy, second siphonogamy, and the third one, it is known as mesogamy. There are three types of entry of pollen tube in the ovule body. Then turn towards the second step of fertilization, and the second step of fertilization, it is known as siphonogamy. The second step, it is known as siphonogamy. And observe here, this one is a complete carpel, one single carpel having stigma where the pollen grain germinates and form the pollen tube. This one is the ovary part, and this is the stylar cavity. Now, the pollen tube when enter in the ovule body through the micropyle, then from the micropyle, the pollen tube reaches up to the female gametophyte, that is embryo sac. And not only pollen tube reaches up to the embryo sac, but along with this pollen tube, two non-motile male gametes also reach up to the female gametophyte. And this transfer of two non-motile male gametes up to the female gamete with the help of pollen tube, this one process, it is known as siphonogamy, where siphon is tube and gamy means gametes. Transfer of gametes along with pollen tube up to the female gametophyte, the process, it is known as siphonogamy. Then the pollen tube rupture the wall of embryo sac, and by breaking wall of embryo sac, it enter in any one synergid cell, because there are two synergid cells. Out of these two synergid cells, the pollen tube enter in one synergid cell. Then, due to the chemicals present in the synergid cell, the tip of pollen tube get burst, and now the complete content of pollen tube released in the synergid cell. Due to excess content, the synergid cell again get burst, and the synergid cell get burst. Now the two non-motile male gametes, they are released just near the egg cell. आता बघा, हे दोन मेल गॅमेट्स टोटली फ्री कंडिशन मध्ये आहेत एग सेलच्या जवळ. मग त्यातलं काय होईल, जो मेल गॅमेट एग सेलच्या जवळ आहे, द मेल गॅमेट विच इज नियरर टू द एग सेल, that fuses with egg, and this fusion of haploid male gamete with haploid female gamete, it is known as syngamy. या प्रोसेसला म्हणतो आपण syngamy. This process phenomena, it is known as a syngamy. What is syngamy? Fusion of haploid male gamete with haploid female gamete. It is known as a syngamy, where the first male gamete used in the act of fertilization, therefore it is also known as first fertilization. Thus, the first fertilization is completed, which results in the formation of a diploid structure called zygote. Okay, syngamy results in the formation of diploid structure known as zygote. Then the remaining one male gamete, now it moves towards the secondary nucleus. Remaining one second male gamete, it transferred towards the secondary nucleus, and now it fuses with second nucleus. This fusion of second male gamete with secondary nucleus, that is haploid male gamete with diploid second nucleus, it is known as a triple fusion. ह्याला काय म्हणतो आपण? ट्रिपल फ्युजन, त्रिवेणी संगम. कारण तीन वेगवेगळ्या ठिकाणचे न्यूक्लिया एकत्र फ्यूज झाले. एक न्यूक्लियस चलाजेलेंकडून आला, एक न्यूक्लियस मायक्रोवेलेंटकडून आला आणि एक मेल गॅमेट. अस्थिगांचं त्या ठिकाणी फ्युजन आहे. Therefore, it is known as triple fusion. And this triple fusion, it is also known as second fertilization. ह्याला काय म्हणतो आपण? Second fertilization. Because in the process of fertilization, second male gamete is utilized. Thus, in angiospermic plants, the act of fertilization completed 2 times, that is syngamy and triple fusion. Therefore, it is described as double fertilization. म्हणजे process काय म्हणतो आपण? It is known as double fertilization, where syngamy results in the formation of zygote and triple fusion results in the formation of triploid primary endosperm nucleus. Thus, the syngamy results in the formation of diploid zygote, and this diploid zygote ultimately develops into embryo. There is formation of embryo takes place from the diploid zygote, and the triple fusion results in the formation of triploid structure, and this triploid structure is known as PEN, that is primary endosperm nucleus. And this primary endosperm nucleus now develops into the structure that is known as endosperm, which is post-fertilization tissue that is formed known as endosperm. Thus, the act of fertilization, it is completed within the angiospermic plant, which is described as double fertilization. I think you understand the entire mechanism of double fertilization. Okay, bye.